Yeah, I'm back. What happened here? YouTube app crashed on the tablet. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. Seems to happen once or twice every month. Usually can recover from it and everything works after that. I think what you were asking me is if this transceiver, it's actually not a transceiver, it's a transmitter and receiver in a single box. If it's uh, if it's all vacuum tubes, and the answer is yes. Everything in it except for the DC power supply, which I'm not using. I use the AC power supply. When it's on DC, it uses a pair of transistors. Trying to explain how to. Well, either way, what it does is it oscillates and steps up the voltage, and then you go from DC to AC for everything, and back to DC again. But I don't use the DC power supply, so everything is vacuum tubes. Even the VFO, which I'm not using, I use a crystal normally. The VFO is all vacuum tubes also. With the exception of a single component, there's a varactor in there. It allows you to do FM with these AM transmitters. Good evening. This is Kilo Charlie 9 Uniform Delta X-Ray. My name is Matt, and I welcome you to the 2 a.m. net. The purpose of this net is to promote the use of amplitude modulation, and also to establish this part of this band as a place for AM activity in this area. Everyone is invited to listen. Licensed amateurs who can do so legally are encouraged to check in. We listen in the AM mode and transmit in the AM mode where possible. If you cannot transmit in AM, we encourage you to listen in AM and transmit in FM. If you are transmitting in if you are transmitting in FM, please adjust your transmit frequency a couple kcs above or below from our receive frequency. This facilitates the use of slope detection, that is, demodulating your FM signal with our AM receivers. When checking in, please announce your call sign in standard phonetics. Again, this is KC9UDX. My name is Matt, and I will now begin accepting check-ins. Any stations wishing to check in, please come now.
Good evening, Matt. W9JCC.
Recognizing Frank, W9JCC, always here. Do we have anybody else? All right, hearing none. Frank, we've got Bratwurst here on YouTube. And his latest comment here says he could have gotten a working ham radio at St. Vincent de Paul. It was $60 with everything. I wonder Wonder what kind of radio that was and what everything includes. But anyway, had a hiccup on the YouTube stream before. Hopefully everything keeps working. It occurs to me I should modify the preamble so that the people on YouTube know that we are operating on 145.7 megacycles amplitude modulation. The AM part should be obvious by now, but I doubt everybody knows the frequency. Probably not a whole lot of people care. They would ask in the comments, but I guess I could add that to the preamble anyway. Or maybe have a short preamble prior to the preamble just for the YouTube people. Anyway, we'll go to the top of the list. Frank, W9JCC, talk about anything you like. KC9UDX here.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And usually your usual strong signal about 40 over 9 here. I got the antenna down a little bit. I had everything grounded here the last few days. We were out of town for a day, and I wasn't quite sure of the weather. So, yeah, she's up about probably around 50 feet or so. And I'm glad to be down in the shack. It's 72 degrees Fahrenheit down here. And, yeah, warm and muggy upstairs. And doing shorts and t-shirt. It's warm enough, but it's not what I would call nice weather. I was talking to Winnie about it earlier, that we had a summer where it wasn't really that pleasant to be outside, sitting out there having a brew or a cup of coffee. So we didn't spend too many days out on the patio this year. And your YouTube came up right away, and I think the delay is reasonably short. I still hear myself talking, so it's probably a little longer than nominal there. Anyway, back to you there, Matt, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. Yeah, I was hoping it would be a little shorter, but I don't think it is. I don't think there's anything I can do to improve that any more than what I've done anyway. I did go and uninstall a bunch of apps from the tablet that's doing the recording tonight. Things that I forgot that were on there. And I also turned off notifications for almost every app that runs on there. So at least I won't be getting interrupted with new deals from eBay or whatever. So that's turned off. But yeah, like I said, I had hoped it would improve the delay here, but I don't think there's much I can do. Yeah, the weather, to me, it's too hot. I can't handle it. I had a very hard time sleeping today, so I'm very short on sleep, having a hard time getting my brain going here. And of course, I've got to go back to work here in another hour or so. Yeah, the weather all year has been pretty miserable. I guess I shouldn't complain. It could be an awful lot worse. I didn't have any damaging weather this year here that I can recall. Even the rains didn't do too much damage except that I had a leak in the roof of my shop, so I got a little bit of rusty sheet metal now, but nothing terrible. I was able to patch that, and even with the heavy rains we've had since then, I have no problems. What else was I going to talk about? Oh, I've mostly finished my oil tank installation here, so my basement is a lot, I can actually walk around in here now, so hopefully pretty soon I can start working on building a new electronics workbench again and get things really cleaned up down here. It's still a disaster, but at least I can walk around on my furnace, so I'm in the process of that right now. As soon as I finish that, I can get to work on some other things down here, hopefully. It's going to get busy at work here soon, so I'm working a ton of overtime now, and I'm going to be working even more very soon. They do what they call surge. They ramp up production for usually 3 months of the year, and they normally do it starting in January, finishing up in April. But this year they're starting in the beginning of November. They're already gearing up for that now. So During that, our overtime increases greatly. I think the company is hoping that we go on strike, and that's why they're ramping up production early, so that by the time contract is around, they will have plenty of inventory. On one hand, I hope I'm wrong, but on the other hand, I kind of hope that we have the guts to strike if they don't give us a better contract than we have now. Not that I can afford to be off of work. And Bratwurst says, Hallicrafters from the late 40s, according to Radio Museum. It came with Mike Manuel's and in use when I walked into the thrift store all tube. It's probably HF. Late 40s Hallicrafters would be pretty band limited too. Probably has 11 meters on it, which is not a good thing. Of course, you don't have to use it. If it was operating in the store, that's kind of scary. You wouldn't want somebody transmitting with that while it's disconnected, or transmitting at all for that matter. Although something like that is probably just a receiver. I'm not sure. If it's just a receiver, $65 might be a little on the high end. Maybe it's a good price. Well, you say it came with a mic, so it's not a receiver. Maybe just a transmitter too. Maybe it's a transmitter and a receiver in a box like this Gonset that I'm running right now. But we're at the bottom of the list, so I won't keep going on and on here. Do we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net? Come now, please. Hearing none. Of course, Frank, if you hear anybody I don't hear, please let me know. But we'll go back to the top of the list. Frank, W9JCC, it's your turn again from KC9UDX.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And I agree with you, it's too hot. Yeah, too hot and too humid. And you talked about an oil tank install. I hope you didn't put one in the ground. It sounds like you got one removed from the basement, so I wonder what happened there. Did you go to gas, or you just got the tank moved somewhere else there, Matt? And talking about furnaces, we're getting a new one tomorrow. And ours wasn't that old. The first furnace we had in this house, I think we had for over 25 years. There was nothing really wrong with it. The XYL kind of thought that it was getting old and put enough pressure on me, so we got a new one. So we got a new carrier here about, I guess it was 13 years ago, and pop it around and everything. When I tried to check it out here a few days ago, it turned out that she didn't come on, and it was I guess it was fault 42, which meant inducer fault. And first I downloaded the service manual, and I was going to start debugging the thing. But to go through the flow chart there, after about an hour, I said, this is going to, depending on which way that chart goes, it could take a long time. So I called the service guys, and they brought a new inducer down from the truck. They had one with them, and that was $1,000. So I was out of warranty, and so for about 3.5 times what that inducer cost, I think, get the whole new furnace, and new Wi-Fi control, and continuously variable gas and blower and inducer variable. So we're going to go that route, and it's kind of unfortunate that they weren't going there. Their inducer assembly had a circuit board, had a motor, a housing, and I don't know what else in there. But they can come in and take out 4 bolts, disconnect a couple of hoses, and the whole thing pops out in a couple of minutes, and much easier to do it that way, I guess, instead of paying the labor cost. Yeah, I see Bratwurst up there on the right-hand part of the screen there, Matt. And we'll say good evening to him. I don't know if he's planning on getting a license someday or not. Maybe he can join us. Back to net control, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. Yeah, I was kind of giving him a hard time about getting licensed in the, I guess it's now a separate video, the original video that I started here tonight, which the YouTube app crashed and I had to start a new one, unfortunately. But yeah, I was razzing him about getting licensed, and in reality it would actually be fun. We could figure out a way, if he was operating HF or even Echolink or something like that, we could get him in here somehow. I've been meaning for a long time to simulcast on 6 meters here, so we can get Gary W9TOF. And unfortunately, I just never get time to deal with that. I do have to, I'd like to realign the receiver in my 6 meter Gonset before I do anything, and then of course I've got to rewire it for AC. It's wired for DC right now. Someday I've got to buy another socket so that I don't have to rewire it every time. It's got one of those, oh boy, I can't think of the name of those connectors. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. These things all have the these connectors on the back that you can reconfigure. Cinch Jones is the name, I think, if I remember right, of those connectors. But so you're supposed to have one for the AC plug and one for a DC plug, and I only have one plug, so I have removed that, and I put Stacon terminals on there to reconfigure it for each, which does work, but it takes a while to switch back and forth, and of course if I were to get that wrong, it could lead to trouble. But anyway, I do have to realign that thing, and then probably, I think I've got an antenna up there I can use with it someday, hopefully, maybe for 2019. Sorry to hear about your furnace. I can certainly understand what you're going through. I am not a real big fan of modern furnaces. There's too many things that can fail and do it in a too expensive of a way. My house came with a Carrier oil furnace. Carrier makes great gas furnaces, but they make absolutely terrible oil furnaces. And it was probably 10 years overdue to be replaced when I bought the house. The heat exchanger was plugged up with soot, and the soot was all that was keeping it running because the heat exchanger had holes in it. And when I called somebody in here to clean it out because it hadn't been done in a long time, I did that in 2005, and when they cleaned it out, they cleaned out all those holes, caused it to run even worse. So I replaced it with a thermopride furnace in 2006. I did that myself. This thermopride furnace is guaranteed forever, and the way it's constructed, it's understandable. I bought it just before they really started modernizing furnaces, so it's very conventional. It's got a conventional oil burner and electromechanical control, although I have retrofitted it with a fully electronic microcontroller control. But I can, if you know, worst comes to worst, I can take that off of there and put the electromechanical one back on pretty easily. So I'm pretty well set. I have all kinds of spare parts, and I have the know-how to keep that thing running. So if anything happens, you know, in the dead of winter, I should be able to keep it going at all times. Like I said, I'm right in the middle of a 10-year service on that. I'm rebuilding the fuel unit, which is an oil pump, and then I will retune the furnace and everything. I've cleaned it out. And the oil tank, my original indoor oil tank, had a pinhole leak in it. It did not leak oil, but it leaked air. And I did not want to take chances and keep filling that with oil. So I replaced it, and I'm glad I did. It was so full of sludge that was causing me problems here, and so now I've got a perfectly clean tank for now. The other one was 40 years old, so it had 40 years worth of sludge in it. This one has, it's brand new. Hopefully it takes 40 years to gather up that much sludge again. So I've got a new tank. I filled it up. I put a new fuel filter, a new air filter. I'm rebuilding the pump. I'll have a new screen. And then, like I say, I'll retune the furnace. The new tank is indoor in the same location as the old one. No, I don't have a tank in the ground, and in fact, I have a copper line underground that goes from the tank to the furnace, and I have replaced that with a copper line above ground inside the basement here. It's actually illegal now to have a copper pipe with fuel in it underground. And I didn't necessarily disconnect it because it's illegal, but I disconnected it because it's actually more convenient for me right now to have it not running underground. And in the long term, it's just better anyway. And again, the other thing I was going to say, I looked at the forecast yesterday, and they were predicting thunderstorms for right now during the net. And so I expect a lot of people will have their antennas disconnected, but I don't think we're supposed to get thunderstorms right now. I haven't looked at the radar. I think that's changed. Bratwurst is asking, how does he get a license? Is it online or pen and paper, and how long does the course and test take? Here's what you do. You get the ARRL ham radio license manual. When I'm not talking here, I will go grab mine and put a picture of it up here so you can see what that is. There's other ways to study. That's the best in my opinion. There's a guy named Gordon West who has a very popular study manual too. It's smaller. I personally don't recommend that. A lot of other people do, and I guess it's up to you which one you take. And you could certainly take the test without studying, but I would highly recommend getting one of those two books and studying. Like I say, you study that book for a month or two and you should be ready to go. And then what you have to do is look up where there's a test happening in your area. It is pen and paper, as you say. It's actually usually pencil and paper. And it's a test session that you actually have to go and do in person. There are some prerequisites. And like I say, I've got a little bit of brain fog because I haven't had a whole lot of sleep, so I'll refrain from trying to explain that. You'll have to have an FCC ID number called an FRN. Technically, you don't have to have it, but it's in your best interest to get that in advance. And then, you just take the test and pass, and away you go. Start out with a technician license, work your way up, get general class, so you can do HF with that Hallicrafters rig that you saw, and eventually become an extra, amateur extra. Not required by any means. You can do what we're doing here with a technician license and a whole lot of other things too. The sky is the limit. And I'm going on and on again. At the bottom of the list, do we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net? Call KC9UDX now, please. Hearing none, back to the top of the list. Frank, W9JCC, it's your turn again. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks, Matt. When you mentioned the configuration connector, the first thing that came to mind was those octa connectors, like I got on the back of the Ranger. They had those to, you could run the modulator section right back into the Ranger to use the onboard modulators, or you could take those jumpers off and run that cable over to the Johnson kilowatt or whatever you wanted to drive with it. So that the Ranger would be the pre-stages to the final audio tubes. And thermal-powered furnace, I've never heard of that one. I'm thinking that's a gas not a gas, but a oil burner. And you do a 10-year service. I've been kind of doing, on my gas furnace, I've been doing about 3 years, so and probably, well, some things I do every year. You know, they have lines to get the water, condensation out. And there's a little white box in there too that's kind of a water collector reservoir. And then there's the area up by the A-frame that, or the A-coil that can get cluttered with, rust or whatever in there. So I usually check that every year. And as far as the heat sensor, I usually do that every 3 to 5 years. And although I found on the old furnace that it went about 20 plus years before it got to the point where it wouldn't light anymore because the heat sensor couldn't sense the flame. So I'm not going to let them go that long. And I thought we were going to get some more weather too. We had some rain earlier, and I told Winnie to ring the dinner bell up there if she sees any lightning. And so far, so good. And Bratwurst there, you can go and just Google, well, do what Matt said there, but if you just want to go through some of the questions, you can go online and probably Google technician class, FCC exam questions, something like that. There's a lot of questions in the pool, but I think there's only about 30 or 40 that are on the exam. So, and it would be, I don't think it's a real tough test if you study for it, but I know I brought it up one time. I was going to get my grandkids, try to get them interested, and there's a lot of them you're just not going to know because there are a lot of rules and regulations and things like that. So you just gotta burn up on them. And I don't think there's any age limit either. I don't know how old Bratwurst is, but I think I got my license when I was 14. And I think you can be any age to get it. So, back to net control, KC9UDX, net control, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. Excuse me. Yeah, you can do it any age, obviously, and there are 6-year-olds, I guess, getting licensed. I'm not sure how that works. I trying to coax my 9-year-old into into doing it, and I think she can handle it. But I think 6-year-old is a little young for that. But yeah, check out the ARRL website. They've got a very good, I guess, a very good guide on how to get started and everything you need to do. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff on the internet. And there's some really good practice tests out there. The ARRL has one. QRZ has a really good one, and there are others too. QRZ, I guess you would say QRZ, is a very good resource. Not only do they have practice tests, they've got a trivia thing on their main page, which kind of gets you some more information that's not really required stuff to know, but good to know anyway, and helps you think about this stuff. The technician exam, the way I recall, is mostly rules and regulations, not a whole lot of technical stuff. And I found the general class test much easier because I knew most of the technical stuff, but I didn't know most of the regulatory stuff. I did take them both at the same time, and I'll never forget, I must have done very poorly on the technician one, barely passing. I don't exactly remember. But when I finished, I requested to take the general test, and they kind of snickered at me like there's no way I was going to be able to do it, and I think I aced that one. I think I got one wrong on the amateur extra, and it bothers me to this day that I got that one wrong. It was something that I'm very well versed in and should have known the answer, and I got it wrong only because my brain didn't work that day when I was taking the test. I just couldn't get that one right. It was about resonant circuits, tank circuits, and it's something I know pretty well, and I just completely got it wrong. But anyway, uh, yeah, as far as the number of years for service, I have kind of a 1 year service, a 2 year service, and a 10 year service that I do on my furnace. I don't recall exactly what the manufacturer recommends. I know that if you call somebody in to do the 1 year service, they do pretty much what I would do every 2 or 3 years. Uh, and I may go towards doing that stuff every year. It's not really necessary. And what I mean is rebuilding the pump, replacing the coupler between the pump and the motor and the blower, and a couple of other things that they're probably not really necessary to do every year, but I think I'm going to start doing that stuff every year anyway. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, the stuff that I normally do every 2 years, you can kind of get away with a couple years, 2 or 3, maybe even 4. But I think I'll start doing that all every year anyway. Thermopride is oil furnace manufacturer here somewhere in the United States. I don't remember exactly where. And like their name suggests, they take great pride in their design. It's very different than other designs. It's very, very rugged. And like I say, they have a forever warranty on the heat exchanger, which everything else in it is replaceable and easy to work on and not expensive anyway. But the heat exchanger is the most important part. It's the one thing you wouldn't want to replace, and that is guaranteed forever. You probably wouldn't want to convert to oil. I guess I would if I were you, but I'm not you, and most people don't. But it would be interesting to look up on their website and see what they have anyway, probably. It's kind of an interesting company doing things the way American companies traditionally do things, and not the way global companies do things. I guess I haven't had any reason to look them up in about 10 years, so hopefully they haven't changed. And with that, we're at the bottom of the list again. Do we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net? Come now, please. Hearing none, I think the other guys have their antennas disconnected. Back to you, Frank. W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And I'm going to mention too, your audio is just outstanding. You're using the TS2000, and you're just great sounding rig there. And fine on the furnace, being very rugged. Well, I guess that's a good thing. And yeah, I don't know. The guys that are putting ours in, I think they're yearly. If they come out, it's like $89 for them to do the whole inspection and clean up, and I imagine they change the filter too. The one thing I can't do that they do is the test for gas leaking out. They got an instrument that they use to see if there's any bad stuff coming out of the furnace there. So that one I can't do. But pretty much everything else, I watched them when we called them after we had it a couple of years in the last furnace, and I just took notes as they were going through everything, and there was nothing there that was out of the ordinary. And fine on the exam and everything there, Matt. Yeah, I took my novice. When I took it in 1954, you could have somebody with I don't know if they had to be what class they had to be, but I think the fellow that gave me mine was probably a general class or above, and took it at home. And then when I took the general, we had to take the train down to Chicago. I was living in Kenosha at the time, and went down there with I don't know, 3, 4 guys from school, and took it down there. And then when at that time, if you had a general class license, you had all the privileges. You could go anywhere on any band just like an extra can now. And then a few years later, they changed the rules and they restricted the general class. So when I was living in upstate New York, I drove up to Schenectady, took the advanced exam there. And then when they dropped the code, as soon as they did that, within a month or so, I took the extra. And my next door neighbor was also a ham at the time. We both went down, took it, and each got 100% on it. But I had to do some somewhat memorizing on that too, as far as some of the questions. The antenna patterns. I didn't remember the vertical patterns that well. What lobes went which way on the two-element arrays and so forth. But all the calculating stuff, I didn't do it the way they showed in the books. When I went to school, they taught us with Laplace transforms, so that's what I used from years past in work and so forth. So anything that involved finding impedances and things like that, we did that way. So let's see. Yeah, as far as the question pool, Bratwurst, if you're listening, the pool is quite large. I don't think I might have mentioned that before. They probably have a couple hundred questions, but they only ask you a small percentage of those on the exam. And I don't know if they charge anything, Matt. You may have mentioned that. I don't have any idea right now, but if they do, it's not a whole lot. Back to net control, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. That's a good point about the cost. I didn't think about that. If I recall, the FCC allows a $15 fee. Now, some clubs that do the testing will charge the full $15, and some do not. I think the MRAC charges like $6 or something. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember, but I remember it was ridiculously cheap. And that fee is only to cover the time of the people doing the testing and whatever materials they use for the testing. It's not so they go out and buy lunch or anything. So that's why it's not very much. If I recall, the technician and general tests both have 35 questions. The extra was 50 questions. I think I was 35 years old when I got the general class license. I remember when I got the extra, it was very, very stressful for me. I had just made a major career change. I went from working first shift and a second job at the same time, and doing a bunch of work here at home. I worked 10 hours at one place, 3 hours at another, and then I came home and did about 3 hours of work on vehicles, and then cooked dinner for everybody. And I had just stopped doing that and started working second shift. So that was part of it, and the other thing was I, for some reason, ended up taking the test in Madison, and I had quite a debacle there. The first time I went, I forgot my calculators, and I decided I'm not even going to go in without my calculators. So we went back home and went out for the next session. And somebody had announced when that test session would be on one of the local nets here, and they had announced it for the wrong week. So I showed up a week too early for the test. And what I had showed up for, they were having a technician class license class to study how to be a technician. And I showed up there and they said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I came for the amateur extra test." And they said, "Well, that's not today, that's next week. But we'll see what we can do." And they gathered up 3 people and they set up a test session just for me, perfectly legal. And that's what I did. And like I say, that was kind of stressful. It was very, very draining for me. And thanks for the compliment on my audio. I don't do anything special here. I just have the Astatic D104 unamplified microphone, which I showed here on the YouTube video, plugged into this Gonset Communicator 4, which is designed exactly for this kind of microphone. And it's, if I recall, it's plate modulated. That's all there is to it. Hard to get it wrong, I guess, in something like this. And I was going to comment on something else here, and now I completely forgot, talking about the testing stuff. But we're at the bottom of the list again. Let's see if we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net. Come now, please. Hearing none, I recalled what else I was going to say here. The leak problem with gas furnaces is one of the reasons I don't want to have a gas furnace. You know, you have two things that can leak. You can have the fuel, which can leak, and you can have carbon monoxide leaks, which are deadly. And of course, you need special equipment to detect that. One of the nice things about oil is you cannot, you know, the government tells you that oil furnaces are a risk for carbon monoxide poisoning too, and that's just baloney. You'd have to deliberately do something to cause a problem that's going to be lethal for carbon monoxide with an oil furnace. A normal everyday oil furnace like I have with a conventional burner simply cannot sustain a burn in a way that will cause carbon monoxide gas to build up. So it will only burn for a few seconds, and then nothing will happen. So the carbon monoxide issue is moot. And as far as leaks, yeah, you could have an oil leak. It's a little bit more difficult than a gas leak, obviously, because liquids don't leak as much as easily as gases do. And I have, I guess I've never actually had a leak. The ways you can have leaks is if your plumbing to your tank isn't oil tight. When they fill up, they use quite a bit of pressure when they fill up the tank, so you could have leaks that way. You could have a leak if you don't have your oil filter screwed on all the way. And I guess if any fitting is loose, you could have a leak, but it's kind of obvious when you do have a leak, so it's easy to repair. You do need special equipment to tune a oil furnace properly. I do have all of that equipment. Although it is possible to get it to run satisfactorily without that, just by using your 5 senses. I did achieve that when I installed the furnace. I tuned it up just by eye, and then I called in the local service guys to do a proper tune-up on it, just because I didn't feel confident that I had it adjusted right without having the equipment myself. And they were astonished that I had just tuned it by eye. They didn't have to adjust anything when they checked it. So, not to brag, but I'm just saying that it's perfectly possible to tune one of these things up with all the fancy equipment. I do have all that stuff now, and typically once a year I will retune it, even though it's not necessary with all the test equipment I have. Anyway, I'm going on and on again, so we'll go back to you, Frank. W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And I think I saw earlier that Bratwurst was 14 years old on his text message there, so certainly old enough to get a license. And another thing you might mention, I don't know if Bratwurst has any UHF equipment, but I think he's in Waukesha. He might let us know there if you are, because we have a ham radio club here in Waukesha, and we have a repeater, in fact 2 of them, on UHF, 440 megahertz, and well, both are on the 440 megahertz band. One of them has digital fusion capability, and the other one is just FM, but it's up pretty high, up about 300 feet is my understanding. on a commercial tower, so it's pretty good coverage. Covers pretty much all of southeastern Wisconsin. And yeah, the tanks in the ground are not good. My son, who lives down in Shorewood, has a very, very old house, and about 7 or 8 years ago, they decided to upgrade their. Well, you probably wouldn't call it an upgrade, but they decided to switch over from oil gas to gas heat. So they used the oil burner had to convert it to gas, and then but they couldn't leave that tank in the ground. I think by law they had to get, or local regulation there, they had to get it removed, and that was a bit of a job because it was very close to the driveway, and part of the driveway concrete had to come up, and a little bit of a mess and a little bit of cost there, but they finally got that all taken care of, and now they've got a very old but rugged furnace that turns on gas. So anyway, back to nut control, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. Yeah, I think it's state, maybe even federal law that you can't have a residential underground oil tank. Maybe it's state law. It probably isn't federal. There is a federal fund to clean up leaks for underground storage tanks. They call it the LUST fee, L-U-S-T, leaking underground storage tank. I get that on my on my bill when they deliver oil. Bratwurst says he's in Barron, so nowhere near here, unfortunately, but I almost guarantee there are amateur radio clubs in the vicinity. They're everywhere. I guess I could look into that. I almost bought a house that had a underground oil tank, and they had some kind of waiver so that it didn't have to be removed, and it was filled with water. Reason being that the house they had additions put on the house, and the foundation of the additions went over the oil tank, and it couldn't be removed. But I did not buy that house. Well, Bratwurst says he has friends in Rice Lake that are amateur radio licensed, so I'm sure they could help him out finding a club or help him out anyway. But like I say, when I bought this house, there was a tank in the basement, and there's a tank in the basement now. And I also have a tank outdoors. Reason being is first of all, I can wait and buy oil when it's cheap, and I can buy oil for the whole year. There's two benefits. Of course, one is buying it when it's cheap, which never works for me. Every time I think the price is at its lowest, it's at its highest for the year, so that never does me any good. And the other reason is that I never have to worry about running out of oil and then having a blizzard and the oil truck can't get in the driveway. I did have that once before I had the outdoor tank, and that was pretty annoying. Now, of course, if that happens and the oil truck can't get in the driveway, I can run down to the gas station and get diesel fuel. An oil furnace can run diesel fuel, avgas, a whole number of things, kerosene, unmodified. You can run all of those things. Now, modified, you can run vegetable oil and all manner of other things too. Just not gasoline and things like that. Now I forgot what else I was going to say here. I do have an LP furnace in my shop, and I have a carbon monoxide detector out there for two reasons. One is actually the reason I actually bought it in the first place had nothing to do with the furnace. I would work on cars in the shop, and sometimes you want to fire up a motor, especially after you rebuild it. And you can't always do that outdoors with the weather, so it's imperative to have a carbon monoxide detector at times like that. But now I have one because of the furnace, I guess. But I do keep that running good too. I don't have any problems with carbon monoxide, and I maintain that furnace myself too, just like the oil one. In fact, quite a few times I've had to find parts out of garbage furnaces to keep that one running. Uh, Fortunately, you can drive by some of these service outfits that do installation and repairs on furnaces, and you will find that they have junk furnaces laying out in the back all the time. And if you ask them, usually they'll let you take parts off of them. Just not take the whole thing because they want to cash in on the scrap metal. But I've had to a couple times get a new control and various parts for that gas burner. And here we are at the bottom of the list again, getting near the end of the net. Let's see if we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net. Come now, please. Hearing none. Back to you, Frank, W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And yeah, I don't know where Barron is, but evidently it must be somewhere near Rice Lake. I'm not sure exactly where that is either, but I think it's southeastern Wisconsin or somewhere. And yeah, we had an oil furnace when we lived in upstate New York, and it also was in the basement. Yeah, the truck used to pull up into the driveway and had a little pipe that came out from the basement, and he'd fill her up. And it sounds like you've got, if I understood you right, Matt, you've got two of them, one in the basement and one outside. So I guess that's where you're getting all the capacity there to make it through the winter. And yeah, they just scrapped the old furnace. You know, their furnace that they're going to take out of here is perfectly fine. I could have paid the big bucks for that new inducer and kept the old furnace. It would have cost me less, but I wouldn't have had the warranty. And you know, next thing that goes, I'd probably have to pay through the nose for that too. And so this new one will have a 10-year parts and labor on it, so we won't have to worry about it for 10 years anyway. So I don't have a whole lot more. I'm running out of things to say here, so I will turn it back to Net Control, KC9UDX, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. And I'm not exactly sure where Barron is. I know it's somewhere up in that direction. I've been around that area somewhere, and I seem to remember seeing signs for it somewhere or something. So I'm pretty sure it is up near Rice Lake, and of course, Bratwurst comments would verify that. Yeah, in New York, oil heat is still very, very prevalent. And it's just around here. It's not real common. There's a lot of people that do have them, though. When I bought my house, I intentionally sought out a place that had oil heat. At the time, I could heat this house for a whole year for about $300 back in 2003. Now, of course, oil prices skyrocketed, and they never really, heating oil prices really never came back down again. So it's still not quite as expensive as natural gas, but it's not enough of a difference to even worry about it anymore. But of course, there are a lot of other advantages from my point of view: the serviceability and the lack of carbon monoxide, and the fact that I don't have a natural gas pipe running to the house. Now, most people aren't concerned about that, and in fact, a lot of people laugh at me for even bringing that up. But you look at the news the last couple of years, and I kind of say I told you so. You have a church in Oconomowoc that blew up because they were working on a gas line half a mile away. And now this business in Sun Prairie, where all kinds of buildings are blowing up, you know, for things that are not really directly related to those particular buildings. And of course, it's not something people should ever really worry about. But for me, I just rather avoid that if I can. Yes, I have a indoor tank and an outdoor tank. The indoor one in the basement, the outdoor one is up on grade level next to the house. Now, these are 275-gallon nominal tanks. They don't really hold 275 gallons, so I would say I have 550 gallon capacity here, but that's not quite true. It's probably closer to 500 gallons. Um, more than enough to get me through a winter, running the heat more than I'd like to. Last year I ran the heat a lot. I ran the temperature a lot higher than normal. My wife was pregnant, so I wanted to keep the house a lot warmer. And I still made it through the winter with about I think about a half a tank in reserve, and that's pretty typical anyway. I normally have anywhere from a quarter to three-quarter a tank in reserve, depending on the weather, I guess. And of course, I don't always start the heating season with exactly 2 full tanks of oil. And this year is an example of that. I've got a full tank in the basement and a quarter tank outside. When I changed out the oil tank all year, I had to be very careful about how much oil I put in that tank because it's a very difficult task getting oil out of the basement. And I was able to get it down to about 50 gallons at the end of the heating season. It was very, very difficult to keep that low because every time I thought I wouldn't have to run it again, here we had another cold spell. So I ended up with somewhere between 30 and 50 gallons left in the tank, and I actually had to purchase a bunch of 5-gallon buckets. And I filled up the outdoor tank. I topped it off as high as I could, and then I filled up 5-gallon buckets, which you can imagine filling those up in the basement and then making sure you don't overfill a bucket, and then hauling them all upstairs 2 buckets at a time is a little bit of work. But here we are at the end of the net. I will see if we have any last minute check-ins. If there's anybody that wants to pop in here at the last minute, here's your opportunity. Come now, please. Otherwise, I guess we'll call this the 7-3 round. We have plenty of time, though. If there's anything else you want to talk about, Frank, go right ahead. But I think we're both running out of things here to say. So, W9JCC from KC9UDX, go ahead.
Okay, very good, Matt. I forgot to mention the D104. I use the D1. I've got a couple of them here. I use one on my SB Heathkit SB series, SB 401 transmitter, and it works terrific. And I got one hooked up here on my Johnson Ranger. And in fact, the one I've got down here in the shack is the one I bought in about 1955, and still humming along. And Bratwurst mentioned a GE fridge, and boy, that brought back some memories because when I was in my senior year up at UW-Madison, I rented a small room on the second floor of this home that this elderly woman had, and to be able to have my own fridge, we found this fridge down in Kenosha somewhere. We put it in the car and hauled it up there, and I used it for the whole year, and just almost made it to the end of the year, and before it finally gave out. But they were a very simple design. They had the condensation coils up on top, and you had that mounted on a flat plate, and underneath the plate was the place where you could put ice cubes, and the whole thing lifted right off the top of the box. So if you lifted that off, all you had left was the box with the door on it underneath. So really a simple design, but it did the job. And yeah, they're kind of classics. So I don't know if there's many of those around anymore. I'm surprised that Bratwurst found one or saw one there at this place where you could pick up odd parts and stuff. And yeah, you mentioned how you got the oil out, Matt, but I thought you changed the tank too. Did you change the tank or somehow found a way to clean it out? I guess I'm a little confused there, but I would think taking a tank out of a existing home would be quite the project, and then you probably have to cut it up with a torch or something. Anyway, 73s, Good hearing you tonight, Matt. Thanks for running the net. Good job as always, and back to net control. KC9UDX, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. And yeah, I did change the tank. I had to carry the oil out and out of the house to make room for the new tank. You know, I couldn't pull the old tank out of the house with oil in it, so I had to empty the tank, haul the oil outside, and then I winched the old tank out of the house. Myself, my daughter, and my 9-month at the time pregnant wife removed that tank, and it was quite an adventure. I had to build skates for the bottom of the tank to get it up the stairs, and I didn't realize, you know, I used old studs from the basement here. There was a wall that was here when I moved in that was never finished, and I tore it down and kept that wood, and I used that wood to make the skates. And what I hadn't realized was that it was cedar, and it never occurred to me that somebody would use cedar for wall studs. I just thought this was old looking half rotted wood, but it was cedar. And the skate got caught on the threshold at the top of the steps, and of course the cedar just started to crumble and it all came apart. And when that happened, it knocked down a bookshelf at the top of the stairs. My wife, who should not have been lifting anything, lifted the oil tank to keep it from landing on me. And we managed to get it up and out. And then I made a short video on YouTube which doesn't show me installing the new tank, but it does give you an idea of how I got it in here. I had to make a different set of skates for that one, and of course winch that down the stairs, which getting it in was a lot easier than getting it out, and for many reasons. Of course, going down the stairs is easier, but also the tank is a lot lighter without all that sludge in there. The old tank is going to be converted into a smoker or a large charcoal grill. You know, it'll be dual purpose. If I ever get a chance to do that, I will probably use it once or twice and probably find out that it's just way too big and not real helpful for me. And I know there's a good demand for something like that out there. I'll build it into a trailer and sell it to somebody. And instead of having to pay to have the tank removed, I would have to pay a significant fee for that. I will make a little money, probably not much, but at least something, selling a smoker and a grill. My refrigerator, in 2005, my original refrigerator died, and I looked on Craigslist and found an old Sub-Zero that somebody had removed to install a new one. And I'll tell you what, if you ever have to replace your refrigerator, a used Sub-Zero is better than any new Samsung you can possibly buy. This refrigerator I have was made in 1983 or something, and it is far better than anything new. I don't even want to go into that now. It's a whole huge discussion, but I think that it originally cost about $20,000, and I paid $500 for it, and it was worth every penny. And yeah, you don't see those older refrigerators around a whole lot anymore, even though they still work. Most of them typically still work and will outlast a new one. But I don't want to keep going on and on. I will say 7-3 to you, Frank, and also to Bratwurst and anybody else that happens to be listening. And I'll read the end of the script here. This concludes the 2 a.m. net. We will meet again on the 13th of November. Until then, this is KC9UDX 7-3, and good night.
Okay, 7-3 is Matt, W9JCC.